everybody. Welcome to another edition of the 7 Innings podcast. A lot of ground to cover, some breaking news from the NCAA. Also an Olympic update for you. And later on in the program, the legend of Langenfeld. We're going to examine the Scarborough strike zone. We're going to hear from Sydney Sherrill of Florida State and, of course, shag some stats with pitchers who rake. All to come on the 7 Innings podcast. Beth Mowens, Michelle Smith, Holly Rowe, Jessica Mendoza, Amanda Scarborough, Jen Schroe, JDH, Jenny Dalton-Hill, Caleb Bro. We've got J-Mac, our producer, Buzz, and a cast of characters behind the scenes making it all happen for us. And we thank you for joining us on what we are getting close to the 10-year anniversary of UCLA's 2010 National Championship, and a great conversation with Megan Langenfeld coming up. The breaking news, guys, we'll start with you, Holly Rowe. An extra year of eligibility granted by the NCAA, but it will be at the discretion of individual schools as to how they will allot the money that will be available for seniors to come back for another year to play after missing out this spring.
So this is very interesting. I think all of us agree that this was great that these seniors get their extra year of eligibility back, but coaches will have the discretion of how to spread that money out. So if they have 13 scholarships, do they give people partial scholarships? And some of this will depend on what seniors had going on in their future. Lonnie Alameda of Florida State had told us, you know, she had some kids that had already been accepted to law school and to grad school. And so can they put those plans on hold, or do they even want to? And speaking to Arizona's Jessie Harper, she had already planned to be at Arizona and be in grad school. So she's already planning to come back, and how much money she's able to get. Now that will be up to Arizona, how they're able to divvy that up. And there are going to be some hard decisions with this. Patty Gasso, saying, hey, this is going to be difficult for us to spread the money out and spread the scholarship stuff out, because they also want to include that incoming class of freshmen and not shortchange them with what they had been promised. So this is a changing landscape. I think it was the right decision, but I do like that they have left it up to the discretion of the schools so that they can make the financial impact very personal to their programs and what they're able to afford.
Well, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what conferences do in order to make it more or less fair or budgetary, because as you mentioned, Holly Rowe, some schools may have larger budgets than others just within their own conferences. So will the SEC come out and say that as a conference, this is what we choose to do, or the Big Ten, the Pac-12? I think all those are going to be decisions that will have to be made down the road. But I do love the fact that they're protecting the athletes to have the ability to have a full and complete year versus just a season that was 36 days long. I do think it brings up an interesting conversation, though, moving forward for the mid-majors. What's going to happen to them? Maybe some of those smaller schools that have very good Division I softball programs, but may not have the funding to be able to keep athletes. Will they then enter the transfer portal and potentially end up at a larger school that has more funds? So I think this will evolve over the next, not just year, but as you mentioned, Holly, probably 2 or 3 years. And then how does it affect rising juniors and seniors in high school as they approach their collegiate careers in the next year or two down the road?
There are so many questions, you guys, that have yet to be answered. And I think that we'll be talking about this 6 months from now, a year from now. I mean, the repercussions of the decision that was made yesterday is not just something that we'll feel in the next year. Like, I think 4 to 5 years, maybe even beyond that, because coaches, their strategy to recruit differently, communicate with their players differently, the money that they're going to be able to give them and spread it out, how they're going to structure their practices because of larger rosters. Are the mid-major players going to transfer to larger D1 schools? I mean, the transfer portal has got to be rocking and rolling. Where is parity going to go with the mid-major schools versus the Power 5 schools? There are so many questions that we're going to continue to talk about as time goes on. But I think all in all, just morally wise, I feel good for the players, the seniors that do get to have that extra year. If I was a player, that's what I would want to.
We got 12 softball scholarships, but then you've got every other spring sport on campus as well. And it could be a matter of, okay, what if, say, one school has a lot of seniors in their spring sports and another school doesn't? We're going to get, each school will get less money because they missed out on the NCAA basketball tournament this year. What about football? if we can't play fall sports, are you then going to have to go back and give a year to all of those fall sport athletes? And are you going to be losing a ton of money if we can't play football? So those are other questions, Jen Schroeder, that have yet to be decided upon. It is my understanding, though, that the underclassmen, they have to have the same deal, if you will, that they were offered. And so you're essentially going to have two freshman classes. The seniors may not get the money they had before. And therefore, you could have to walk back on to play that extra year, Jen.
Yeah, and my understanding with the seniors is, let's say you're a senior and your coach limits your scholarship money. So you're on a 75% and they now say we only have 50 for you. And that senior can't afford it. And she then wants to transfer to another university. If she transfers to another university, she goes against the 12 scholarships for the next university. But if she stays at her current school, then she doesn't go against that 12 scholarship. So I find that to be very interesting. To Amanda's point, the transfer portal, I believe, is going to be crazy. Now, my next question is, those two freshman classes, those two sophomore classes, is it going to be like a red shirt where they say red shirt freshman? Is it going to be fifth year when you've got Maya Brady as a senior at the World Series? Is it just going to be a combined senior class?
I'm just reading right now, direct from the NCAA's press release, and the council voted to only do this for seniors who would have exhausted their eligibility during this last shortened season. So that does not apply. However, it does say Division I rules limit student athletes to 4 seasons of competition in a 5-year period. The council's decision allows schools to self-apply waivers to restore one of those seasons of competition for student athletes who had competed while eligible in the 2020 spring season. And so how I interpret that means, let's say you were a freshman and you competed this year, but your season was either cut short by injury or you played in even fewer games than the 25 games that had been played. You could essentially apply for a waiver down the road to have this year of eligibility restored. One other little update from this that I wanted to share is that they are also going to allow schools to use money from the NCAA. Let me see the word that they use right now. There is a fund that they use.
Fund, yeah.
The Student Assistance Fund. And so, for example, about $18 million was used last year for different things, like if you needed to fly home for a parent's funeral. There's all different things you can apply to use that Student Assistance Fund. And so they will allow schools and students to apply. Let's say you were a senior and you are not going to get the same level of scholarship coming up. You could apply to that Student Assistance Fund. However, as Beth mentioned, the money is less at the NCAA right now because they were planning to distribute in June $600 million. And they have announced that they will only be able to distribute $225 million in April until the insurance policy for the canceled NCAA tournament pays off. So the NCAA is not the same monetary body moving forward, and that trickle down is going to impact every sport.
I think the other thing too that they will have to figure out here in the coming weeks is, what if I'm a freshman and I selected a school specifically because they had a big senior class that was leaving and I knew I was going to start right away or I was going to be the ace? What am I going to do now? Am I going to be able to go somewhere else instead to play right away? And the other thing is, keep in mind too, you got some universities that it costs $60,000 a year to go to. You got other universities that it costs $10,000 to go to. So are those also going to be factors that families and student athletes will have to weigh in as to where they will spend that extra season? This will also have an impact, guys, on, the fight for another assistant coach for baseball and softball. Where is that money going to come from now if it has to go to scholarships for players or money for players? The other big news this week, as we move down the lineup card, which you can get on your social media at 7 Innings Podcast. We are on Twitter. We are on Instagram, so you can follow along each week. There will be virtual meetings now allowed in certain conferences. I'm imagining it will go nationwide and NCAA-wide in the coming days, but you can now have a virtual meeting like we are on social media with your entire coaching staff and your teams, guys. And that's something, Jess, that we're already seeing certain teams dive into.
Yeah, and I think it's huge just to be able to have that communication. A lot of, I think, teams were already kind of doing it, separate, just being able to communicate, but to honestly be able to see each other and then, be able to work on stuff. And I think that's where it's going to get, kind of how far they can go as far as, even drills or doing anything like that. I think just to be able to see each other's faces right now, talk about what's going on, and then from there and take it and actually be able to do physical stuff, I think it will be the next step.
No, you're right, Jess. I think that this is such an uneasy time for all these athletes. There's a lot to discuss. And how cool is it to have the opportunity to talk to your teammates right now? The people that you rely on when you're struggling, when you're going through adversity, you rely on your teammates and your best friends. So I think if I was in this situation and I was a collegiate athlete still, I mean, right now with talking to you guys is like one of the best parts of my week to hang out. So I can only imagine for those, I can only imagine for those girls that spend literally almost every single minute of their days with that teammate and that family, that this is really valuable for not only, just making it through this hard time, but trying to figure out how to rebuild and move on from this situation.
Well, and talking to so many coaches, I mean, they just want to, this is what they do, right? I mean, they want to know, like, okay, so you're pitching right now, like, what do you look like? What is it physically, like get on the tee. I want to be able to see all of this. And so I just feel like not only to be able to see each other's faces and have that, especially right now, but I was talking to so many coaches yesterday and literally they were waiting to be able to find out, how can I coach? And I think now learning how to do that virtually.
Oregon, starting tomorrow, they're doing leadership training, and they have a whole plan in place. So the first time they're able to do a Zoom meeting tomorrow with their entire team, they've already put some things into place of this is what we want to do to team build moving forward while we're socially distant.
I'm sure they're also watching softball school with the package deal. I'm sure that's part of the rehabilitation program and process in the off season. We're going to hear from Megan, who obviously played at UCLA and is now an assistant coach at Oregon, coming up shortly. But those virtual meetings will be a big plus for teams here to stay in touch with one another and feel like a team throughout this without having the ability to practice or play games. The other big story this week is the return of the Olympics after the postponement. It has been announced that they will be playing same time next year in Tokyo. That is the plan right now. So it would be end of July into early August. We had a special podcast last week. Hope you heard that. If not, here's some sound bites from some of the Olympians we talked to about, just the difficulty of putting this Olympic dream on hold for hopefully just 1 year.
It's just difficult to process right now. I think we're kind of in the same boat with a lot of people. Like our lives feel like they're on hold. And, we've planned our entire lives around the Olympics being in Tokyo in 2020.
It would be a lie not to say that there is a little bit of a shock factor, a numbness factor, I think, for everyone.
If this was 2008 and this situation happened, it would be so easy at 21 to be like, yeah, I can easily do this. But I haven't mentally prepared to, number one, have the conversation with my husband yet. That's honestly, it's not that I don't think we can find help with the kids. It's like, I don't think people truly understand the grunt work that goes into it for him when I leave.
And I don't know if Haley remembers, but as soon as we took the field, I jumped on her back and was like, guess what? You're an Olympian. And just to be part of that with a generation that ultimately thought they weren't going to be able to do it was pretty special.
I firmly believe that we're all going to band together as a softball community throughout the world to continue to make ourselves the best that we can possibly be in 2021.
I think that the biggest asset of making this decision so quickly for these athletes was their ability to say, all right, it's a year. It's not 6 months. It's not 9 months or whatever. It's a year. I think that also helps fans. It helps with TV ability for everybody to know when the broadcasts are coming and not having to shuffle around Major League Baseball, the NBA, all those things I think were a really big decision. And to make that decision very quickly, I think helps everybody. It helps the world just kind of settle in and be like, all right, it's a 1 year reset. And we know what it looks like because we know what it looked like coming into 2020. We're just now going to have the 2020 Olympics and 2021. And by the way, I thought it was also interesting that Tokyo decided with the organizing committee, everything stays Tokyo 2020. It's not going to become Tokyo 2021. Because you can think about how that would just open a whole can of worms with licensing and printing all new materials and everything like that. So it's still the 2020 Olympics, just held in 2021.
Well, and July 23rd. I mean, that's the thing. It's like there's a date. Like that is so huge. You know, we just talked about the mentality of being able to like even just virtual meetings, seeing your teammates. Like I know as an athlete, like postponement, that word, it sounded like cancellation, right? It's like it's not happening. It's not happening. Now there's a date. It's July 23rd, yes, of 2021. But for so many athletes, they don't want July 23rd, 2020 at this point because no one's able to train and do the things. But I was watching Kat Osterman on social media. She already put up literally her workout program from now until July 23rd for next year. So you can kind of just put that in place. This is how I'm going to pitch. This is when I'm going to do it. That date speaks huge instead of this vague postponement for sometime next year, maybe.
When we return, it's the 10th anniversary of UCLA's 2010 National Championship, the legend of Langenfeld, and the emergence of Slammin' Sammy.
Hi, my name's Samantha Camuso, formerly known as Slammin' Sammy. Thanks, Beth Mowens. I'm a member of the 2010 UCLA National Championship team. My favorite memory of that championship series was that 8th inning in Game 1, the dugout. That was my best memory, was the feeling in that dugout, the contagious, positive mojo that was going on, a team over self mentality, the rally caps, the cheers. We knew we were gonna win, whatever it took, and I will never forget that feeling.
Welcome back to the 7 Innings podcast. Still to come on the program, Amanda Scarborough's Strike Zone. We'll hear from FSU Sydney Sherrill. But first, it's time to step back in time. This would have been, it is, the 10-year anniversary of the UCLA National Championship in 2010. Unfortunately, we won't get to watch a championship game this year. Hopefully, we'll be back next year, though, in OKC for another one. And who, if anyone, can match the legend of Langenfeld? Here's Holly Rowe.
Joining us now is one of the best legends of all time in the College World Series and great UCLA pitcher, Megan Langenfeld. How are you?
I'm doing well. Trying to figure out a new normal right now with the quarantine and everything going on, but so far so good. Just trying to get a new daily routine going, but we're doing well.
You hit 706 in the Women's College World Series, the second best batting average of all time. How do you describe that feeling of being in a zone like that at the biggest moment of your life?
Yeah, good question. I have no idea, but no, actually, I know there's times where everything slows down. And I got to work with an amazing sports psychologist named Ken Revisa. He's no longer here with us, but he would always, I wouldn't say harp, but his big thing that he would always really preach to us is be present, be here. And so I remember doing my best of trying to be in the moment. And I was fortunate that it just kind of all worked out and the ball looked like a watermelon and it found holes at important times, which I was fortunate with. My teammates were awesome through that whole process.
Dr. Revisa, he was kind of a legendary sports psychologist in both baseball and softball. I know he passed away, but I got a chance to meet him at the World Series, and he was wonderful.
Yeah.
He was one that was also very famous for having the little tiny toilet in the dugout.
Yeah.
You know, like flush it, like move on to the next thing. That can't help you in the past. Move on to the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love that he was instrumental for you. Okay, you also second best batting average ever, best slugging percentage in Women's College World Series history, 1.529. Just exorbitant. 4 home runs, 8 runs, the best total ever in the Women's College World Series. Like, as you're teaching your new athletes and your new players, do you ever,
I know your personality. You probably won't brag on yourself, but are you ever like, hey, when I was at the World Series, here's what I was able to do and here's how I could do it? Like, how do you use your success?
I try and use it as previous experiences. So my players give me a hard time of, because I don't brag about myself hardly at all. So they like to do the bragging for me. But I try and teach them things that works for me that I'm hoping that will work for them. So for example, the be present, be here. And I feel like that translates not just to hitting, but also to pitching and to fielding in every aspect of the game of you have to be present in the moment, pitch to pitch, and you can't worry about the previous pitch before or the next pitch after. So I might not take the actual numbers and say I hit home runs and did all that, but I try and use those experiences to really teach our players on how to hopefully go up to the next level.
3-0 as a pitcher, and you really had a famous screwball. It's very curious. I feel like we always said you only had a screwball. How many pitches were you working with and using to get that great record at the World Series and win a championship?
Yeah, no, it was really only about 2-3 pitches. It was a screwball, which was honestly just a running fastball. I was able to kind of manipulate my hand to get the ball to kind of go wherever I wanted, moving, if you're looking at home plate, moving left to right. And so whether I wanted it to kind of come up and in a little bit or down and in, or just move side to side. And so I would locate that on the inner half to righties. And then just as a surprise factor, I would move it all the way over and throw it outside to righties just to keep them honest. And then I had a changeup. So I always tell pitchers I didn't have one pitch by choice. I tried other pitches. They just weren't very good. They weren't competitive enough to succeed at the next level until I found this one pitch and was able to kind of master and perfect it.
But that's the beauty, is you did master the location. So you had absolute control and location of your one pitch.
Yeah, there's I learned this from Beth Torrena at LSU, and the 3 S's is spot, spin, and speed. And usually if you have one, you'll be okay. You might not be an All-American or anything like that, but if you have one, you'll be successful. If you have 2, you'll have pretty good success and hoping to get to that next level of a Women's College World Series or a championship. But if you have 3, you're kind of like a unicorn. You're kind of like the special thing that everybody's trying to achieve. And there's not too many that have the 3. I could think of probably Monica Abbott, Kat Osterman. They're like the 1%ers.
That screwball really ripped up your finger. And
Yeah.
tell me what you had to do, because your finger was pulling away from your fingernail where it would rip on the seam.
Yeah.
Tell me what you had to do to win that game.
So that game, I ended up having to use super glue. And most pitchers have done this in the past, but they end up super gluing their fingers. And it's basically you're trying to close the gap between the tear and the other side of the tear. So yeah, I ended up super gluing. I ended up super gluing this middle finger and then just basically trying to shut it close. And super glue is going to stay only for so long. So you just reapply and reapply. So yeah. And then at the hotel, I would sometimes put my finger in pickle juice. That's an old baseball remedy. The pickle juice has obviously a lot of salt and it dries out the wound. So you soak it in pickle juice and then you super glue it the next morning.
Then just to cap this off with really one of my greatest memories is in game 1 of the championship series, the best 2 out of 3, you had a really rough 7th inning, if you remember. Do you remember what happened in game 1?
Yeah.
I wonder if it's seared into your brain. What do you remember? What?
So I remember it, and that's I try and tell athletes, like, you talk about being present. I didn't just give up the game tying home run. I also gave up the game winning home run in the 7th. So I went from, oh my gosh, we just need 3 outs. And pitchers, by the way, never count down the outs. Never, 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 never count down the outs. You play it out and pitch by pitch at a time. So there's the little tidbit for today. Never count down the outs. So I gave up back-to-back home runs and then got pulled, and I needed to get pulled. I probably didn't see that in the moment, but now looking back as a coach, oh my gosh, get me the hell out of there. Like, she's not in it. Like, she needs help. So I get pulled, I get put at first base, and I remember clearly thinking about the post-game press conference and thinking to myself, someone's going to ask me, so what does it feel like to give up back-to-back home runs? And like, idiot, what are you thinking about? You're in a game.
Goes to extra innings, your team
Yes.
gets you out of that inning, and game time hit happens. And
Yep.
then what happens when you step up to the plate?
So I ended up, we get the last out of that half inning. And I remember also clear as day, Monica Harrison, our shortstop, and Gianna DeSalvatore, our second baseman, who are two awesome leaders. I would say they were kind of the rocks, along with Julie Burney, the rocks of our infield for sure, but the rocks of our team. And so they come into the dugout, and I'm like totally in my feelings, like just not doing well. And they look at me clear in my eyes and say, Lang, we're going to win this, right? Like, we're going to win this. And I'm like, well, if they think we can win this, then I guess we can. And so I ended up coming up to that inning. And we talk about things being in slow motion, and it looked like the ball was floating. And so just tried to put a good swing on it, and it ended up going out. So it was awesome. But I remember all the stuff leading up to it was insane. It was an awesome team moment.
It just is so hard to believe that was 10 years ago. It felt like yesterday when she started talking about some of those memories. And I really love that she gave a shout out to Dr. Ken Revisa, who was such a major impact in sports psychology, both in baseball and in softball. And I know he impacted many of you athletes, but I loved her advice of staying present in that moment. And I think that's great advice that will help all of us in our current situation in the world.
Most definitely, Holly. And speaking of another legend, Coach John Wooden actually passed away during that championship series, June 4th of 2010. And when you look at the championships of UCLA holistically, you see very dominant teams. And in 2010, that wasn't the case. They had 7 losses in the Pac-12 conference, and they went into the World Series as an underdog. Their first game was against Florida. And if we rewind back to 2008, Florida knocked them out of the World Series. So putting 16 runs on the board and just, I mean, the hitting, the spectacular from Slam and Sammy, Gianna DeSalvatore, Andrea Harrison, and I know Megan Langenfeld gets a ton of the credit for her heroics in Game 1, but it was a complete team effort that really catapulted them to be the 2010 national champions.
Well, and what would this conversation be without a little bit of Arizona love? Sorry, Jen, I'm going to have to just go there. But for Arizona to lose in the beginning and have to come all the way through the losers bracket, they were facing an opponent that was tired, let's be honest. But it was in the regular season that it was a back and forth fight between the two of them. And so kudos to UCLA, an amazing performance. But the thing that stood out to me was the home runs that were coming at such pivotal moments throughout the championship series. Megan Langenfeld, you're right, does get a ton of credit for that walk-off win. But there were so many long balls. That was the important piece for me as I was watching that championship series. Just, you never knew who was going to hit the next one.
That's exactly it, Jenny. I mean, when I remember being in the booth and just like looking at Smitty and looking at Beth and being like, are you freaking kidding me right now? Like, what is happening? Like, and we've seen it now in so many World Series, especially in the 17 inning game. We just got to see the recap of that, where you're just jaw-dropping ties, then come back to win it, to take it over, extra innings. But that moment, I felt like just blew up as far as knowing that a game is truly not over and that the heroes within the game. And I know Langenfeld, that's why she gets so much of the credit. There was such a team to get to that point, but oh my gosh, was that home run one of the most magical moments in World Series history.
And I know you remember, Jess, this is Audi folklore right now, but that was it. Remember the dropped fly ball and the misplayed fly ball should have been the game out in left center field.
Left center field.
That Arizona did not get to.
It's the curse of Arizona left fielders, Jenny. It's a curse. It's happened. Look at the history of Arizona. They have lost games because of that 3 times.
It's true. And what I reached out to Kenzie Fowler, who was pitching, and she said, you know, in that moment, we all just, the wind came out of our sails, knowing that that was the moment that the game could over, and then they have to go to extras, and they were exhausted already. She said that was a really pivotal moment for them, and they really didn't rebound.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, Jenny, they were exhausted because they had to beat Tennessee twice in the semifinals to make it into the championship game. They do that. They also overcome, you have to give a big kudos to Kenzie Fowler, because remember at the beginning of the tournament, she had all those illegal pitches called on her.
Yes.
She didn't have hardly any all year, and then she shows up in Oklahoma City, and all of a sudden there's all these illegal pitches. In fact, she had 16 of the 22 that were called in the first 8 games of that Women's College World Series. Another little bit of information, this was the year of the home run, and they actually backed up the fences. Do you remember that? They used to be at 190. They backed them up to 200, and they put them up to 6 feet. They used to be 4 foot, right? Where the outfilders could really go over and grab those.
When Caitlin Lowe would go over
yes.
that. Remember her going over the fence?
Through the fence.
But it was amazing how many home runs were blasted out, even with all those changes. But it definitely was a hard year to be in the circle for pitchers trying to keep that pivot foot down.
We've got a lot more to come on the program, including Scarborough. She's got a strike zone on her wall, folks. She's got the drill of the day for us. We're going to shag some stats with pitchers who rake, and also hear from Sid Sherrill. But first, Andrea Harrison wants to tell us about that grand salami in the 2010 Champ Series.
Hey everybody, this is Andrea Gasso, formerly known as Andrea Harrison, and my favorite moment from the 2010 National Championship game has to be the Grand Slam. I've been preparing for that moment for a really long time. Everybody had been walking Lang, and I'm just happy that it happened and I was able to step up.
Welcome back to the 7 Innings podcast. Great stuff there on the 10-year anniversary of that national championship for UCLA. Florida State, of course, won a natty a couple of years ago with Sydney Sherrill, one of the young stars of that team. And this week, she had a chance to sit down with Amanda Scarborough.
So season ended and you went back to Oklahoma. What have you been doing?
I've definitely, it's kind of been like a whirlwind of emotions when it ended. Being in Tallahassee when it ended was like the day that we found out that, they were canceling all. It was like the most emotional day probably of my life, and all the emotions seeing from the seniors and stuff. And so just kind of getting over that, I feel like I've kind of just wanted a break almost. Like it was just so much, and I don't know, I feel like I try to see the positive side of things. So I've been trying to see it as like this break has been, a blessing in disguise. And so coming home, I've gotten to spend a lot of time with my family that, I usually don't get to spend with them. So I've been doing that a lot, spending a lot of time with my family, and my parents are just so thrilled to have me home and have all my siblings together at one time. So
you guys are in Oklahoma, and so Tiger King is like the talk of the town right now. Like, what's it like to be in Oklahoma, and have you seen Tiger King, and what are your thoughts?
It's just crazy. I honestly had no idea who he was before this. And my friend, one of my best friends here, she can remember going to his zoo when it was open, and she remembers seeing him and stuff, which is crazy to me. And I don't know, it's just crazy that kind of representing Oklahoma, it's kind of not embarrassing, but it's not really what all people are like.
Going back to y'all's team and Lonnie, I mean, we just love Lonnie, and I'm sure she's so much fun to play for and be around. Like, what's something that we don't know about Coach Alameda?
She's just indescribable. I feel like you can't put a finger on what she's done for you or how she's impacted you. And I don't know, I think everybody that has played under her, just been around her for a long period of time, would pretty much say the same things. She's just a one-of-a-kind woman. But I can't really put a finger on something that other people wouldn't know, just how great she is, I guess. I feel like blessed to be able to play under her. I'm just so grateful that I chose Florida State and her coaching staff, because definitely would not be the person I am today without them.
Who comes to mind for you that you looked up to, or who you feel like is one of the best hitters that you've ever seen play the game?
Definitely Jessie Warren, just because I played with her, and probably because I grew up baseball. I wasn't really into college softball growing up, and so I wasn't really around. I think just a year before I came to Florida State was the only time I really watched college softball, and so I don't even remember watching it when like Lauren Chamberlain was around, which is crazy. So I think if I would have been watching, I think I would definitely have a few more people, but just my first one that comes to mind is Jessie Warren.
I loved how she talked about Jessie Warren being what she considered the greatest hitter, because she didn't really have anything to compare it to. She grew up playing baseball, and she got to play with Jessie Warren, who also had a baseball background. So she really looked up to Jessie Warren. They were on that championship team together. And also, I just liked hearing her talk about Tiger King. I had to ask her about Tiger King. She lives in Oklahoma. How did I not do it? So it was great to catch up with her and hear what FSU and Lonnie's been up to.
When we talk about sluggers, the big story this year was supposed to be Jessie Harper's quest to become the home run queen in college softball history and a chance to pass Lauren Chamberlain. The NCAA has decided as of right now that the statistics in this shortened season will count. So at last, let's see, Jessie Harper now at 76 home runs, and Jenny Dalton-Hill, she will have a chance to track down that 95th home run, which is the record, next season. And so the discussion amongst the 7 Innings podcasters right now is, should the statistics count? And is it possible that in 4.5 years' time, Jenny Dalton, there might be a freshman out there that could break your all-time RBI record, which still stands to this day?
Well, and I was looking through the records this past week as we were talking about pitchers who rake and talking about the big hits that we have in our bracket so far. And when I'm looking through those records, the thing that stands out is pretty regularly the game numbers are similar. So there may be a 15-game disparity between records, but when you add in an additional 26 games to records, when right now you've got some home run chases going on, there could be RBI chases because of this, it's going to rewrite record books with an additional 26 games. So there has to be some way to delegate that that's what happened. There's got to be an asterisk next to those records, but I think the way that I would want it handled is just making sure that, I don't know, I have a hard time giving a gift of 26 games to these athletes and then allowing them to rewrite the record book. I would much rather have it be a situation where if you're coming back and playing a year, that those numbers from this year don't count. We talked last week about Alex Martins at UK, who is off to an amazing start with RBIs and batting average, and she's not going to be able to come back next year. So I think those numbers for her should count. But when you talk about Jessie Harper, who's chasing a home run record from Lauren Chamberlain, I think it's a situation for her where these home runs from this year shouldn't count. She should go back. If she gets a do-over year, then her stats should be do-over as well. Jess, what do you think?
There's no championship. There's no awards. This, as sad as it is and as sad as it makes us, 2020 is not a softball season. They did play 26 games. They played those games, and that was a gift. I just do not feel like the stats should count. And in my opinion, Jessie Harper, 10 home runs, I think that's amazing. It's not fair. I would have loved to have had 26 more games to add to our stats. She gets those games. She has those memories. That team, every player that got to play has that opportunity, but they get another year. These stats can't count because it's an advantage, and it's not fair, especially to me. The biggest record in our entire game, the most exciting, is that home run record, and Jessie Harper will break it. And to me, not only an asterisk should be there, it just isn't fair. She should do it in 4 years, and she still could.
Okay, I could not disagree more strongly, or I couldn't disagree more strongly, however you're supposed to say that. I am kind of furious with this reasoning. You know what's not fair? Putting in all the time and work that these athletes did and having their season cut short in this unprecedented global crisis. That's not fair. And not having a World Series to play in, that's not fair. And so I don't think that we should be worried about ancient records. Of course, there will be asterisks. Of course, we will all understand that they got extra games, but they played these games. The work was done. Even though the season was short, these were real games, sanctioned games, and these stats absolutely have to count. What's not fair is what happened to these student athletes this year.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Holly. Like, I think that, I mean, no offense, I appreciate all the records that everybody puts in, but that's a small like dip in the ocean compared to what's going on globally right now. And especially when, you know, like the challenge of trying to have to sit out a year, and it's like coming back from injury. It's a long road. It's a tough road ahead to try and rebuild the season. And I understand that, you know, you get 26 games, but I was actually looking at it and it's kind of crazy because, so right now, like somebody like Jessie Harper is at 207 games. Jenny, you played 251 games. Jess, you played 259. I played 252. Lauren Chamberlain, who actually holds the record, only played 220. So she's already at a disadvantage because she was injured for like 30 games in her junior season. So I think that you can throw all this stuff in, but the reality is like Chamberlain got hurt. Things happen to different people that are out of your control. So, I mean, the stats are going to stay of what they are. I mean, like you said, Holly, they played those games.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kayla. And I think that the other thing to remember is that home runs, it really is dependent on number of at-bats as well as number of games. The other thing I find interesting when you really look at both of their statistics is the number of walks that Lauren Chamberlain had in her career. 207 times she was walked. If you look at Jessie Harper, she's only walked 51 times in her career. So she swings it. She is not going up there looking to walk to first base. She's looking, especially in the Arizona air, to put that ball out of the park. And I'm sure Kendrea says, swing it. You got it, the ability to swing it. So when
some could be unintentional intentionals.
And you look at bats, number of at-bats for home run, is that Chamberlain hit a home run every basically 6 at-bats or 6.4 at-bats. And Jessie Harper is 8.8 at-bats. So I think that even if Harper breaks it, you could still look at Chamberlain as probably the most efficient home run hitter ever.
Yeah. Well, and one last thing, if they got hurt, 20 games, or I'm unsure. I think that the red shirt percentage is 20%. Those stats would still count. So it's technically just a few more games that they're playing if they tore their ACL or hurt their shoulder and they had played deep into like all of February and a little bit into March. Like it's not that many more games, and the stats should still count.
They were done with almost 50% of their games. I'm on Team Jess here. My mom told me growing up, life is not fair, Jennifer. So I am on Team Jess. 20% is very different than almost 50% of a season, in my opinion. Sorry, had to jump in.
There are things that can happen on the field, whether or not you're walked a lot, whether or not you get hurt. There are other extenuating circumstances as well. Remember, Stacey
Who's in
Newman,
front of you in the lineup and behind you in the lineup?
Well, no, not only that, but remember, Stacey Newman redshirted the year that UCLA was ineligible for the NCAA tournament, also took a year off to play with the Olympic team. So she was at UCLA 6 years. She was a little older by the time she finished her career, perhaps more wiser and experienced at the plate. You have other players that go on 2-year missions. They're older when they're in the batting cage, or they're facing older pitchers. So there are all kinds of fun, extenuating circumstances to consider here. I'm on the fence because Harper will have a chance to break the record next year. But what if coaches or other pitchers decide, what if they're on Team Jess and Team Jen and they decide, you know what, we're not going to throw to her. We're going to walk her so she can't break the record.
We're going to hit her.
Stuff.
Yeah, we're going to throw right at her.
And there could also be a freshman right now that gets the benefit of these extra games that we don't know in 4.5 years' time will then break Jessie Harper's record because they got the extra games.
Pitchers, you guys can create your own strike zone at home with some electrical tape. So to know where to put the strike zone, first of all, home plate is 17 inches wide. So that part's easy. Go 17 inches across from inside to outside. Then the top of the strike zone is going to be at the bottom of your sternum. The bottom of the strike zone is going to be at the top of your knee. Whenever you're practicing, you don't just have to use a ball, you can roll up some socks. I have 6 ankle socks all rolled up together so you can pitch into the wall and not hurt a ball and not hurt a wall. Whenever you're throwing into the strike zone, this is a strike. The top of the ball has to be at the bottom of the sternum, and then this is also a strike. The top of the ball at the bottom of the knees. Have fun.
So I thought it was just really important for pitchers to still be able to find a way to have a consistent release point, focus in on a strike zone. And I think too, Michelle, like knowing truly by the rule book, what's a strike and what's a ball at the top and the bottom of the strike zone.
Yeah, especially in these times, Amanda, where you may not have a catcher, obviously, to throw to, and you might think, oh, I'm just going to throw into a net. By visually being able to see the strike zone, your brain body awareness helps you with your release, being able to hit your targets. And it's fun. You can challenge yourself to hit all 4 corners. There's a lot of different things you can do to stay motivated, to stay involved, and to really continue to grow your game. So I think that's important.
Yeah. You could even make a smaller strike zone with a tighter umpire, or make a bigger strike zone. Just another play off of that too. Because no umpire is exactly the same, let's face it.
And as Megan Langenfeld told us during her interview, her command of her spots is being able to run that screwball at any spot she wanted on any side of the plate. That's how you become an elite pitcher, so maintaining those spots. Okay, great ideas, great segments. I know there's going to be some dents in walls at home, and we apologize. Don't charge us for those. But coming up next, everybody's favorite segment. I'm kind of playing around with different ways to lead us into it. This week it's going to be a British. Coming up next, shagging stats. Welcome back to this week's Shagging Stats. We are so excited to hear that the Olympics will be 1 year away. They've been postponed to July 23rd, 2020. So Holly Rose, Shagging Stat today, 478. That is how many days until the 2020 Olympics in 2021?
Well, speaking of Olympic Games, Holly Rowe, my Shaggin' Stat is on a hitting pitcher, to me, the best hitting pitcher of all time. I was a teammate of hers in 2004 Olympic Games. By the way, she holds the Olympic record for batting average, 545. She hit in Athens, people, 545 in the Olympics. And she also holds the record for ERA, .12. She was a beast. She's now inducted in the Hall of Fame. Because of that, the Olympic Hall of Fame, that's my Shaggin' Stat. Jenny, what do you got?
Okay, so Jess, I'm going to play off of that, because not only was she amazing in the Olympics, but Lisa Fernandez in 1993 led the country in batting average collegiately, hitting .510, and also led the country with the lowest ERA at .25. So an amazing pitcher around the world, but also collegiately. But let me point out one of our very own who led the country collegiately. Back in 1989, Michelle Smith led the country with strikeouts per 7 innings. She had 8.56 strikeouts per 7 innings. Smitty, pretty amazing. Kudos to you.
You know what that means? No free passes. She hates those effing free passes.
Awesome. Well, speaking of other pitchers that rake, I'm going to go back to 2010 and Megan Langenfeld in her Women's College World Series. She had 12 hits, so she was 12 for 17, a .705 batting average in the Women's College World Series, 4 home runs, so 33% of her hits in that Women's College World Series were home runs. Langenfeld getting it done in the circle and with the bat. What do you say, Amanda?
Well, I have a name that not a lot of people talk about very often, but from A&M, my alma mater, Mel Dumasic. She was a 3-time All-American, just over a 2.0 career ERA, hit almost 50 career home runs, and hit almost 150 RBIs. So a 3-time All-American that hardly anybody ever talks about. So gig 'em. Kayla?
Yeah, Amanda, I'm going to go back to my alma mater as well and give some credit to one of the Alabama greats and my former coach, Stephanie Van Brakel. She finished her career with a sub 1.6 ERA, 40 home runs, but she gets a ton of credit and goes down in history at Alabama for her senior year, beating Monica Abbott twice. And not only did she beat her in the circle twice, hit a home run in Game 3 to secure the 3-game sweep over Tennessee.
Nice.
Or actually, Jen. I can't skip Jen.
It's okay, but Steph is an amazing player. So I'll keep on trend with talking about our alma maters. It's not Lisa Fernandez because Beth Moans told me I'm not allowed to. We can't give her enough credit. But I'll take it to somebody who maybe people don't know a lot about, Courtney Dale. In 1999, one of the most dominant pitchers, only lost one game that year, was 33-1 with a .98 ERA. People who do remember her for her pitching, but she actually sits in the top 20 on 5 different UCLA offensive record books. Pretty impressive. Courtney Dale.
You know, I share a birthday with Coach Carol Hutchins, May 26th. The year is irrelevant. So I'm going to go to Ann Arbor, and I'm going to throw out Sarah Griffin for my shaggin' stats. When she graduated in 1998, she was number 1 in wins, strikeouts, and shutouts. And she was number 1 in hits, batting average, RBI, and slugging percentage. Thanks to Megan Langenfeld for joining us. Thanks to Sydney Sherrill. We're probably going to have some other fun people to chat with on the next 7 Innings podcast. See you next time.